Imagine this: a small-town bank turned into a slaughterhouse. 5 hostages dead, their blood staining the marble floor, but not a single dollar stolen. The vault stands untouched, millions left behind. Detective Ethan Cross has seen plenty in his 20 years, but never a crime like this. A robbery without a robbery. A massacre without a motive. And buried in the chaos, one chilling clue: a figure in a grey suit, captured on surveillance, slipping quietly out the back. Not a robber, not a hostage, someone else. From that moment, the case stops being about money and starts being about power. Witnesses vanish, survivors turn up dead. Every lead is silenced before it speaks. And the deeper Cross digs, the darker it gets, until all roads point to one man, a US senator with secrets worth killing for. But the truth doesn't live in vaults or courtrooms. It lives in shadows, in whispered threats, in the evidence someone is willing to burn a city to keep hidden. This isn't just a heist, it's a cover-up, a conspiracy. And for Detective Cross, it's the kind of case that doesn't just end careers, it ends lives. Welcome to the heist that never happened. Chapter 1. Blood on the floor. The sirens cut through the night, like jagged glass, wailing down the narrow streets of Pinebrook, a town small enough that everybody knew everybody, and loud enough that everyone would remember this sound for years. Detective Ethan Cross pulled up in his unmarked sedan, the red and blue glow already bouncing across the brick facades of the sleepy downtown. The bank, First National of Pinebrook, sat on the corner of Main and Maple, its front doors shattered, glass glittering across the pavement like spilled diamonds. He stepped out, trenchcoat flaring in the chilly wind, and immediately caught the stench: cordite, gunpowder, and blood. Too much blood. The uniforms on the perimeter looked rattled. One young officer bent over the curb, losing his dinner into the gutter. Cross couldn't blame him. Inside, the lobby was a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the marble walls. Desks were overturned, papers scattered like confetti after a parade. But this wasn't celebration. It was carnage. 5 bodies lay sprawled across the polished floor, each one covered with a sheet that did little to hide the dark stains seeping through. A woman's arm dangled limply from beneath one sheet, her painted nails a grotesque splash of color against the gray tile. Cross's jaw tightened. He'd seen plenty of scenes in his 20 years, but Pinebrook wasn't the kind of place where this happened. Not until tonight. Detective Cross. He turned to see Lieutenant Harris, his commanding officer, standing grim-faced near the counter. Harris had the bulk of a man who'd played linebacker once upon a time, but tonight his shoulders slumped. 5 dead hostages, Harris said flatly. Robbers came in, guns blazing around closing time. Security cameras caught 3 masked suspects. They ordered everyone down, herded them toward the vault. Cross scanned the lobby, and then they left, empty-handed. That made him pause. Empty-handed, not a dollar missing, Harris confirmed. Vaults untouched. Registers. They killed 5 people for nothing. Cross let that sink in. Bank robberies were rarely this violent anymore. Criminals wanted quick cash, not blood on their hands. Something about this didn't add up. Where are the survivors? Cross asked. In the conference room. 3 left alive. Harris lowered his voice. Shaken up, but they'll talk. Cross nodded and moved deeper into the scene. Forensics was already at work, photographing shell casings, marking blood spatter, bagging evidence, but something gnawed at him. He stopped at the vault entrance. The heavy steel door stood open, time lock still engaged. Inside, neat stacks of cash sat undisturbed, untouched. Millions, just sitting there. If this wasn't about money, then what the hell was it about? The survivors looked like ghosts when Cross entered the conference room. Karen Mitchell, mid-40s, the branch manager, sat rigid with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Beside her, Tommy Heller, a college kid who worked as a teller, stared into his lap, bouncing his knee like a piston. The third, Dennis Cole, an accountant for a local firm, dabbed sweat from his forehead with a trembling handkerchief. Cross introduced himself, his voice calm, steady, the tone he used to coax information out of rattled witnesses. "Start from the beginning," he said. Karen swallowed hard. It was almost closing time. 3 men, ski masks, rifles. They screamed at us to get on the ground. They shot Mr. Lanning right away, just to make a point. Her voice cracked. The others started crying, begging. She broke off, covering her face. Cross shifted to Tommy. What did they want? Money. The kid blurted. They said open the vault, open the vault. His eyes darted, wild. They were angry, yelling. They said they'd kill us if we didn't hurry. Cross studied him. It sounded rehearsed, like he'd already told himself the story a dozen times in his head. And you? Cross turned to Dennis. The accountant hesitated. I thought they wanted something else. One of them kept shouting, the box, not the money, the box. Karen snapped her head up. That's not true, she said sharply. They wanted money, that's all. The contradiction hung in the air like smoke. Cross let the silence stretch, watching their faces. Fear, but also something else. Karen's defensiveness, Dennis's nerves, Tommy's two-pat answers. He leaned back. We'll talk again tomorrow. Get some rest. None of them would sleep tonight. Neither would he. Later, back in the evidence room, Cross and his new partner Detective Mia Torres pored over the surveillance footage. Torres, fresh from the city and still brimming with sharp edges, handled the keyboard while Cross leaned over her shoulder. The grainy black and white video showed the 3 masked men storming in, firing shots, dragging hostages. Chaotic, terrifying. Then, a glimpse of something odd. Freeze that, Cross said. Torres paused the frame. In the corner, barely visible near the vault, stood a 4th figure, not masked, not armed, a man in a grey suit, blending into the shadows. Who the hell is that? Cross muttered. Torres zoomed. The man's face was obscured, but his posture was calm, deliberate, not like a panicked hostage. And then, just as the robbers fled, the man slipped quietly out a side door, unseen by anyone else. Cross felt his pulse quicken. That makes for... But we only found 3 survivors. Torres frowned. So who was he? That question lingered long after they left the station. It was past midnight when Cross finally trudged into his apartment. He tossed his coat on the chair, poured himself a whiskey, and sat in the dark. The images replayed in his mind. 5 bodies on a marble floor, millions left untouched, a ghost in a grey suit, vanishing into the night. He rubbed his eyes. Pinebrook wasn't supposed to be like this. He'd moved here from the city to escape the constant churn of violent crime. But evil, it seemed, didn't respect zip codes. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number, he answered. Cross. A voice crackled on the line. Low, distorted, mechanical. Detective, it said. If you value your life, stop digging. Cross sat up, ice in his veins. Who is this? The voice ignored him. Forget the vault. Forget the box. Walk away, or you'll end up like the 5 on the floor. The line went dead. Crow stared at the phone, the warning echoing in the dark. Forget the box. They knew what he'd seen, and they wanted him scared, but fear wasn't in his nature. He set the glass down, his mind already working. Whoever they were, they'd just made one mistake, telling Ethan Cross what not to do. Now he was going to find out exactly what was in that box. Chapter 2. Ghost in the footage. Morning light leaked through the blinds of the precinct's conference room, striping the walls in pale gold. Detective Ethan Cross nursed a black coffee that tasted like burnt tar, staring at the stack of crime scene reports spread across the table. He hadn't slept. Too much whiskey, too much replaying that voice on the phone. Torres strode in, fresh-faced despite the hour, her dark hair tied back in a practical knot. She carried 2 bagels in a paper sack, tossed one his way. You look like hell, she said. I feel like hell, Cross muttered, tearing into the bagel anyway. What have you got? She slid a flash drive across the table. Full surveillance footage, all angles. I pulled the backup files before anyone else could mess with them. Cross arched a brow. You don't trust our tech guys? Torres smirked. I trust them to follow orders. I don't trust whoever's giving the orders. That edge again. Sharp, cautious. She wasn't just a rookie with a chip on her shoulder. She had instincts. Cross respected that. They plugged in the drive, and the footage rolled. Different camera angles, different timelines. They watched the chaos unfold again. Masked robbers charging in, shots fired, hostages screaming. Cross leaned closer. There. Freeze. Torres paused. The figure in the grey suit appeared again, this time clearer. He stood near the vault door, unmoving while bullets flew. He didn't cower, didn't scream. He just waited. Torres zoomed in. The man's face was turned slightly away, obscured by shadow, but his posture was almost patient. Not a hostage, Cross murmured. Not a robber either, Torres added. He's too calm. He knew exactly what he was there for. They watched as the robbers herded the hostages, demanding the vault be opened. The man in the grey suit lingered just outside the frame. Then, as the robbers retreated empty-handed, the suited man slipped quietly through a side exit. Gone. Cross sat back. That makes 6 people unaccounted for. 3 robbers, 3 survivors, but we saw 7. Torres frowned. So who is he? Later that day, they re-interviewed the survivors. Karen Mitchell, the branch manager, sat stiff-backed in her office chair. She'd changed clothes, but the faint smell of smoke and fear still clung to her. Cross leaned forward. Karen, did you see anyone besides the robbers that night? Anyone who didn't belong? Her eyes darted. No, just the 3 gunmen. Are you sure? Torres pressed gently. Think carefully. A man in a grey suit. Karen froze, just for a fraction of a second, but Cross caught it. Then she shook her head firmly. No, I would have remembered. Too quick, too certain. They left her office, closing the door behind them. Torres whispered, "She's lying." Cross nodded grimly. Yeah. Question is, why? That evening, they tracked down Dennis Cole, the accountant. He lived in a drab apartment on the east side, the kind of place where the wallpaper peeled in long strips and the neighbors kept their heads down. Dennis opened the door looking worse than before, pale, hollow-eyed, jumpy. "Detectives," he stammered. "I already told you everything." "Humorous," Cross said. They stepped inside. The place reeked of stale beer and fear. Papers cluttered the table, most of them financial statements, ledgers, numbers scrawled in frantic ink. Cross scanned the mess, doing some late-night math. Dennis rubbed his temple. I couldn't sleep. Keeps replaying. You know, the shouting, the shots." Torres cut in softly. "You told us yesterday that one of the robbers asked about a box. What did you mean?" Dennis hesitated. His gaze flicked to the pile of papers, then back to them. I don't know. Maybe I misheard. Or maybe you didn't," Cross said, voice low. "Maybe you heard exactly what they wanted." Dennis swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. Before he could answer, the phone on his counter rang, shrill in the silence. He jumped like a startled rabbit. "Go ahead," Cross said. Dennis picked up, hand trembling. "Hello." A pause, his face drained of color. Then he slammed the receiver down. "Who was that?" Torres asked. Dennis shook his head violently. "Wrong number." Cross stepped closer. "They told you not to talk, didn't they?" But Dennis said nothing, just stared at the floor like a condemned man. Back at the precinct, Torres tapped nervously on her keyboard, compiling the day's notes. Cross leaned against the window, looking out over Pinebrook's quiet streets. "This doesn't smell like a robbery," he said finally. Torres glanced up. "Then what does it smell like? Cover-up, diversion. Somebody wanted something inside that bank, and the money was just a smokescreen." She leaned back, arms crossed. "So what's the play?" "We chase the mystery man." Cross nodded. "He's the key. Find him. We find the motive." That night, Cross drove home under a heavy sky. Clouds pressed low, swallowing the moon. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the same prickling at the back of his neck he felt last night when he spotted the glowing cigarette. Inside his apartment, he locked the door, poured another whiskey, and dropped into his chair. He should have been exhausted, but adrenaline kept his veins sharp. The phone rang again. Same unknown number. He answered. "Cross." The same distorted voice crackled through. "I told you to stop." Cross clenched his jaw. "And I told you I don't take orders." A pause, then a low chuckle, mechanical but chilling. "You think you understand, but you're already in too deep." "Who's the man in the grey suit?" Cross demanded. The voice ignored him. "Next time, detective, it won't be a warning." Click deadline. Cross lowered the phone slowly, his reflection ghostly in the dark window. That's when he noticed it, taped to his front door, visible only from the inside, a small white envelope. Heart thudding, he retrieved it. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. The picture showed him and Torres leaving Dennis Cole's apartment earlier that day. The note scrawled beneath in jagged handwriting. "We see you." Chapter 3. The Safe Deposit Secret. Detective Ethan Cross hated banks. It wasn't the money. He didn't have much of that to hate. It was the way they smelled. Sterile, chemical clean, with that faint metallic temps of coins and ink. Banks always felt like places where secrets were locked away, waiting for someone desperate enough to bleed for them. This morning, standing inside the vault of First National of Pinebrook, Cross couldn't shake that thought. The vault door hung open. its massive steel wheel frozen mid-turn. Inside, stacks of bills sat neatly wrapped, untouched. The crime scene tape fluttered faintly as the air conditioning hummed. Torres crouched near the rows of safe deposit boxes that lined the far wall. Clipboard in hand, she was reading off serial numbers to a forensic tech. 231, intact. 232, intact. 233, sealed. She paused, tapping the metal face of box 237. "This one's different," she said. Cross stepped closer. Box 237's lock was scuffed, the keyhole scratched, as if someone had worked it hard. Unlike the others, its surface bore faint smudges, prints hurriedly wiped, but still visible under the dusting powder. "Can you open it?" Cross asked. The tech shook his head. "We need the manager's master key, or a court order." Cross turned to Torres. "Let's get Karen Mitchell back down here." Minutes later, Karen appeared, still pale from the previous night, her lipstick smeared as though applied in the dark. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You wanted me, detective?" "Yes," Cross said. "Box 237. Who rents it?" Karen hesitated, then pulled out a ledger. That one's registered under a corporation called Greybridge Holdings, LLC. Opened about 6 years ago. No local contacts. Who has access?" "Only the account holder. I've never seen anyone actually come for it." Cross studied her face. She was nervous, more than she should be. "Open it." Karen blinked. I can't. Not without authorization." Torres stepped forward. "5 people died in this bank, Ms. Mitchell. Authorization's the least of your problems." Karen flinched but finally produced the manager's key. With a trembling hand, she inserted it alongside the text duplicate. The mechanism clicked, heavy and final. The drawer slid out, empty. Cross's gut tightened. Torres leaned in. "So either the robbers got what they came for, or," Cross finished, "someone else did, before them." Karen's voice trembled. "Detectives, I swear I didn't know." But Cross barely heard her. His mind was already racing. Whoever the man in the grey suit was, he hadn't come for cash. He'd come for this. And now it was gone. Back at the precinct, Cross spread the bank's files across his desk. Torres perched on the edge, scrolling through her laptop. "Greybridge Holdings," she said. "Shell company. Registered in Delaware, like half the shady corporations in the country. No real address, no phone number, no board of directors listed." Cross lit a cigarette, ignoring the no smoking sign taped above his desk, which means someone didn't want to be found. Torres frowned at the screen. "Wait, there's more. About 4 years ago, the Treasury Department flagged several of Greybridge's transactions, suspicious activity reports, transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans. But then the file just stops, like someone closed the book on it." Cross exhaled smoke. "Or buried it." Torres leaned closer. "So whatever was in box 237 was evidence. Evidence somebody wanted erased." Kraus nodded grimly. "Which means the robbery was never about money. It was a cleanup job." That evening, they brought Dennis Cole back in. He looked worse. Same wrinkled shirt, deeper shadows under his eyes. He sat across from them in the interrogation room, wringing his hands. "Dennis," Cross began calmly, "we opened the safe deposit box. It was empty." Dennis's head snapped up. "What? No, it can't be." Torres's eyes narrowed. "Why would you say that?" He stammered. I don't know. I just thought." Cross leaned forward. "You knew, didn't you? You knew the robbers weren't after money. You heard them mention the box, because that's what they came for." Dennis shook his head violently. "No, I didn't, I swear." Cross slammed a hand on the table, startling him. "Then tell me why you looked like you'd seen a ghost when we asked yesterday." Dennis's eyes darted around the room, desperate, cornered. Sweat ran down his temples. Finally, his shoulders sagged. I can't. If I say anything, I'm dead." Torres softened her voice. "Dennis, people are already dead. 5 innocent hostages. You're not protecting yourself. You're protecting whoever did this, and they won't stop. Not until you end up under one of those sheets." For a moment, Dennis wavered, lips trembling as though words wanted to escape. But then he clamped his jaw shut, shaking his head. "I can't," he whispered. "Please, just let me go." Cross studied him. Fear radiated off the man like heat waves. Whatever this was, it went deeper than a small-town bank. Hours later, Cross drove home, the day's revelations grinding in his head. Box 237, a shell corporation. Evidence tied to offshore money, hidden away until someone staged a massacre to retrieve it. The phone on his passenger seat buzzed. Unknown number. He didn't answer this time. Instead, he parked, climbed the stairs to his apartment, and unlocked the door, and froze. The place had been searched. Drawers half open, papers scattered. Someone had been here, thorough but quiet. Cross drew his weapon, moving cautiously room to room. Empty. Whoever it was, they were gone. On his kitchen counter sat another envelope. He tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. This one showed box 237 before it was emptied. The angle suggested it came from inside the vault itself. Scrawled beneath, in the same jagged handwriting as the last note, "You're too late." Cross's pulse thundered in his ears. Too late, for what? The next morning, news broke. A body had been found. Dennis Cole, in his apartment, shot twice in the chest. Execution. Cross stared at the crime scene photos, bile rising in his throat. Dennis hadn't lied. He really couldn't talk. Torres whispered, "They're cleaning house." Cross slammed his fist on the desk. "Then we need to find out who's giving the orders." Torres nodded, grim. Box 237 was the key. Now we just have to figure out what was inside before it vanished. Chapter 4. The Survivor's Lies. The fluorescent lights in the precinct interrogation wing buzzed like angry insects. Detective Ethan Cross sat at the table with a legal pad in front of him, though his pen hadn't moved in 10 minutes. He kept replaying Dennis Cole's body in his mind. The blood pooled around him, the neat, execution-style wounds. Dennis hadn't been killed out of rage. He'd been silenced. Torres entered, balancing 2 manila folders. She dropped one in front of Cross, slid into the seat across from him. "Autopsy confirms it," she said. "Dennis was killed sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. Close-range shots, suppressed. Professional hit." Cross rubbed a hand down his face. "So much for our only lead." "Not our only lead," Torres corrected. She tapped the folder. "Karen Mitchell and Tommy Heller, survivors 1 and 2. Their statements line up with each other, or with what we've seen." Cross's eyes hardened. "Then let's see how they hold up under pressure." They started with Tommy, the college-age teller. He sat hunched in the chair, looking small in his oversized hoodie. His knee bounced furiously, the rhythm of someone running from his own nerves. Cross leaned forward, voice calm but sharp. "Walk us through it again, Tommy." From the moment the robbers entered, Tommy licked his lips. "They came in shouting, waving rifles, told us to open the vault, said they wanted the money." Cross tilted his head. "Funny, you sound pretty certain about that." "But Dennis said he heard them ask for a box." Tommy flinched, just slightly, but enough. I don't know what Dennis thought he heard." "It was chaos." Torres chimed in softly, almost sympathetic. "Tommy, people were screaming, shots fired. But you remember their exact words." Tommy's eyes darted. "They said, 'money, I swear.'" Cross leaned closer. "Then why didn't they take any? Vault was untouched. Cash still sitting there. Can you explain that?" Silence. Tommy's knee bounced harder. Cross slammed his palm on the table, making the kid jump. "You're lying, and people are dead because of it." Tommy's face crumpled. "I don't know anything. Please, don't make me say more." Cross studied him. Fear, yes, but not the raw terror Dennis had shown. This was the fear of someone caught between truth and self-preservation. Karen Mitchell was next. She carried herself differently, polished, controlled, though her hands betrayed her with subtle tremors. "Ms. Mitchell," Torres began, "you told us yesterday the robbers only demanded cash." Karen nodded stiffly. "That's correct." Cross tossed a photo onto the table, a still from the surveillance video. The grainy figure of the man in the grey suit, near the vault. "Then explain him." Karen's eyes flicked to the photo, then back up. "One of the hostages, maybe." Cross's stare was unrelenting. "He wasn't logged among the survivors. He left through a side exit." "Who was he?" "I don't know," she insisted. "Wrong answer." Cross shot back. He leaned across the table, his voice low, dangerous. 5 people are dead. Dennis Cole's one of them now. If you're covering for someone, you're next on their list. Is that what you want?" For a heartbeat, Karen's mask cracked. Her lips parted as if to confess, but then she straightened, voice icy. "I've told you what I know." Cross pushed away from the table, disgusted. "You've told us nothing." Later, in the observation room, Torres crossed her arms. They're both holding back. Cross lit a cigarette despite the sign on the wall. No kidding. Tommy's scared but pliable. Karen, she's controlled, like she's protecting someone. My money's on her. Torres frowned. Then why would she let Dennis get killed? Maybe she didn't have a choice, Cross muttered. Or maybe she's next. That night, Cross sat in his car across from Tommy's apartment, engine idling. The kid's story gnawed at him. If Tommy knew more, he'd either talk or vanish like Dennis. At 11:47 p.m., Tommy's lights went dark. 10 minutes later, a black sedan rolled slowly past his building. Cross's instincts screamed. He tailed it. The sedan weaved through side streets, finally pulling into a deserted lot behind an abandoned strip mall. 2 men got out. Dark coats, purposeful strides. Cross parked half a block away, watching as they disappeared into a side entrance. He reached for his phone to call Torres, then froze. His gut twisted. What if Torres was compromised? What if the warning voice had been right about someone inside the department? He shoved the phone back in his pocket and grabbed his Glock. If Tommy was their target tonight, Cross wasn't going to let him end up like Dennis. Meanwhile, Torres sat alone in the precinct, reviewing financial documents again. She wasn't supposed to still be there, but the Greybridge Holdings connection wouldn't leave her mind. A transaction date glared from the screen. 3 days before the robbery, a massive transfer had moved through an account tied to box 237. She scrolled further. Her pulse quickened. The receiving account belonged to a campaign fund. Not just any campaign. Senator Robert Kane, a man with enough influence to bury entire investigations. Torres's breath caught. Then her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're in over your head. Walk away." Her hands shook as she locked the screen. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching Cross. They were watching her too. Cross crept through the shadows of the strip mall, Glock steady. The interior was dark, the smell of mildew thick in the air. He followed faint footsteps down a narrow hallway. A door creaked open ahead. He crouched, inching closer. Inside, muffled voices. "The kid knows something. Tie up loose ends." Cross's pulse hammered. He peered around the corner. Tommy was on his knees, hands bound, eyes wide with terror. The 2 men from the sedan loomed over him, guns glinting in the dim light. "Please," Tommy begged, voice cracking. "I didn't tell them anything, I swear." One man raised his pistol. Cross burst into the room, gun drawn. "Police, drop it." The men spun, firing. Bullets ripped through drywall. Cross dove for cover, returning fire. The echo thundered through the abandoned mall. When the smoke cleared, one man was down, blood pooling under him. The other had vanished into the maze of halls. Cross rushed to Tommy, cutting his restraints. "You all right?" Tommy trembled, nodding weakly. Cross grabbed him by the collar. "Who are you lying for, kid? Tell me before you end up like Dennis." Tommy's lips quivered. "It's bigger than you think. Bigger than all of us. The senator." But before he could finish, a shot rang out from the shadows. Tommy's head snapped back, blood spraying across Cross's shirt. The kid collapsed in his arms, lifeless. Cross spun, but the shooter was gone. Only darkness remained. Chapter 5. Shadows in Blue. Detective Ethan Cross sat alone in his office, Tommy's blood still staining the cuffs of his shirt. He hadn't changed, hadn't slept. The scent of copper clung to him like a second skin. 2 survivors were gone. Karen Mitchell was the last one left alive. And if the killers wanted to erase every witness, she was next. Torres knocked once, then entered, holding 2 styrofoam cups. She slid one across the desk. "Double espresso," she said. "You look like you need it." Cross didn't touch it. "Tommy's dead. Executed right in front of me. Same as Dennis." Torres sank into the chair opposite him, her face pale but composed. "Which means this isn't just about cleaning up the robbery. Someone's eliminating anyone who might connect them to box 237. Cross exhaled slowly. "It's not some crew of thugs, Mia. This is professional, coordinated." Torres nodded grimly. "And connected to power." She hesitated, then slid a file across the desk. "I found something last night. Greybridge Holdings funneled millions into a political campaign fund. Guess whose?" Cross scanned the page. His stomach knotted. Senator Robert Kane, a man with deep ties to law enforcement budgets, oversight committees, and backroom deals. A man untouchable by ordinary means. Cross muttered. So Kane had something locked in that box. Evidence. Someone staged a massacre to get it back. Torres leaned forward. "And now they're silencing anyone who can link him to it. For a long moment, the office was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then Cross spoke, voice low. "I don't trust our own department." Later that day, Internal Affairs called Cross into a meeting. The IA agent, Richard Malloy, was lean, sharp-eyed, with a perpetual half-smile that made him look like he knew more than anyone else in the room. "Detective Cross," Malloy said smoothly, "you've been stirring up a lot of noise. Shooting in an abandoned mall last night. Witness dead in your custody. Care to explain?" Cross glared across the table. "The witness was executed by a professional hitman. You want an explanation? Ask whoever keeps pulling my suspects out from under me." Malloy's smile thinned. "Careful. You're suggesting inside involvement." "I'm not suggesting," Cross growled. "I'm saying." Malloy folded his hands. "Ethan, you've been at this too long. You see shadows everywhere. Maybe it's time to step back before you start accusing your own brothers in blue." Cross stood, leaning on the table. "If one of my brothers is murdering witnesses, then he's no brother of mine." Malloy didn't flinch. "Watch yourself, detective. You're playing with fire." That evening, Torres met Cross in the parking lot. "They're on to us," she said, glancing round nervously. "IA isn't just investigating you. They're trying to shut this whole thing down." Cross lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the lines of exhaustion etched in his face. Malloy as much as admitted it. "They don't want Kane touched. Means he's protected." Torres lowered her voice. "Then we can't trust anyone here. If we're going to keep Karen alive, we'll have to do it ourselves." Cross exhaled smoke. "You're suggesting we go rogue?" "I'm saying it's our only option." Cross studied her for a long beat. She wasn't bluffing. She believed it. Finally, he nodded. "Then we keep Karen breathing until we know what Kane's hiding." They brought Karen in under protective custody that night. She sat in the safe house living room, her hands twisting in her lap, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "You know why you're here," Cross said. "2 people connected to that robbery are dead. You're next unless you start talking." Karen shook her head. "You don't understand. I can't." Torres leaned forward. "Karen, listen to me. The senator doesn't care about you. You're just collateral. The only chance you have to survive is to tell us what you know." Tears welled in Karen's eyes. For the first time, her polished mask cracked. "They told me," she whispered. "They said if I ever mentioned the man in the gray suit, I'd end up in the ground. They're watching me, always watching." Cross's pulse quickened. "So you do know who he is?" Karen nodded shakily. "He came into the bank the day before the robbery. No mask, no gun, just a briefcase. He asked about box 237. I told him only the account holder could access it. He said." Her voice faltered. Cross leaned in. "He said, what?" Karen's lips trembled. "He said, the senator sent him." The room fell silent. Cross felt the pieces sliding into place. Messy, bloody, but undeniable. Hours later, Cross drove Torres back toward the precinct. Rain slicked the streets, streetlights reflecting in watery streaks. He gripped the wheel tight. "We need hard evidence. Testimony won't cut it against a man like Kane." Torres nodded. "Then we tracked the gray suit. Find him, flip him, and we'll have the senator by the throat." Cross was about to respond when headlights flared behind them. Too close. A black SUV. The vehicle accelerated, slamming into their rear bumper. Cross fought the wheel, tires squealing. "Hold on," he shouted. The SUV rammed again, harder. The car fishtailed, nearly skidding into a lamppost. Torres drew her pistol, twisting to aim out the back window. "They're trying to kill us." Cross swerved, trying to lose them in the rain-slicked streets. The SUV stayed glued to their bumper. Gunfire erupted, shattering the rear window. Torres ducked, firing back. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the SUV's grille. Cross yanked the wheel, cutting hard into an alley. The sedan skidded, water spraying. The SUV barreled after them. Another gunshot. Glass exploded near Cross's head. Then the car jolted violently. A blast of white heat tore through the chassis. The sedan flipped metal screeching as it rolled. Cross's world became glass and fire. The car slammed onto its roof, sliding to a stop in a shower of sparks. Everything went silent. Smoke filled the air. Cross groaned, blood trickling down his forehead. Beside him, Torres hung limp against her seatbelt, unconscious. Through the shattered windshield, Cross saw the SUV's headlights cutting through the smoke. Figures stepped out, silhouettes in the rain, guns in hand. They were coming to finish the job. Chapter 6. The Double Cross. Rain poured in steady sheets, drumming on the overturned sedan like a war drum. Detective Ethan Cross coughed, forcing himself upright, glass crunching under his palms. His vision swam, blood dripping into his eye, but he could see enough. 3 men stepping out of the black SUV, dark shapes moving toward the wreck, rifles gleaming under the streetlight haze. Torres hung motionless beside him, blood streaking down her temple. Cross tugged her seatbelt free, shaking her. "Mia, come on, wake up." No response. The gunman closed in, their boots splashing through puddles. One raised his weapon, aiming straight at the wreck. Cross yanked his Glock from its holster, bracing against the mangled doorframe. He fired twice. The first shot clipped the gunman's shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second shattered the headlight, plunging the scene into deeper darkness. "Get down," Cross barked, though Torres remained limp. Bullets tore into the car, sparks flying, metal groaning. Cross crawled out through the shattered windshield, dragging Torres with him, adrenaline surging through his battered body. He half carried, half dragged her into the rain-slick alley, firing blindly behind him to keep the gunman at bay. Somehow, they made it 2 blocks before the sirens cut through the night. Not police this time, but ambulances. By the time the uniforms arrived, the SUV was gone. Cross collapsed beside Torres on the curb, lungs burning, vision tunneling. For the first time in years, Detective Ethan Cross blacked out on duty. He woke in a hospital bed, for in his arm, monitors beeping steadily. His ribs ached, his head pounded. Torres sat in the chair across from him, a fresh bandage wrapped around her temple. She looked exhausted but alive. "You finally decided to join the land of the living," she said dryly. Cross grunted. "How long was I out?" "About 6 hours. You're lucky to be breathing." He shifted painfully upright. The SUV gone, clean like it was never there. Cross clenched his jaw. "Of course." Torres leaned forward, voice low. "Listen, there's something I need to tell you." Her tone made his gut tighten. She hesitated. Then, "I haven't been completely honest with you." Cross narrowed his eyes. "Start talking." "I was placed here by the Bureau," she admitted. "FBI. I've been undercover in Pinebrook for months, investigating Kane, the robbery, box 237. It's all tied to a case bigger than this town. I was sent to work with you, but I couldn't blow my cover until I knew who I could trust." Cross stared at her, fury and betrayal warring inside him. "You used me. I didn't have a choice," Torres said. "Kane has people everywhere. Cops, feds, you name it. If I'd told you too soon, and you slipped to the wrong person," Cross cut her off. "Don't you dare. Don't you put this on me. People are dead, Torres, witnesses, kids. And you're telling me you've been running your own OP behind my back." She leaned closer, her voice sharp. "And if I hadn't, you'd already be dead. Don't you get it? Kane isn't just a senator. He's connected to organized crime, to cartels, to foreign accounts. Box 237 had the files linking him to all of it. That's why the robbery happened. That's why people are being silenced." Cross's fists clenched around the blanket. He wanted to throw her out of the room, wanted to trust her at the same time. His instincts screamed both ways. Finally, he rasped, "So what now?" Torres lowered her voice. "We need to find Kane's fixer, the man in the gray suit. He's the one who cleaned out the box. If we get him, we get the evidence, but we can't do it officially. Too many dirty hands." Crow stared at her. His partner, his betrayer, his only ally. Before he could answer, the door creaked open. Lieutenant Harris stepped in, raincoat dripping. His eyes flicked from Cross to Torres. "You two are in over your heads," he said flatly. "IA wants you off the case. Effective immediately." Cross's blood ran cold. "You're shutting us down." "Orders from above," Harris said. "I don't like it either, but you're done." Torres stood. "You can't do that. If we stop now, more people die." Harris's jaw tightened. "This isn't a request, it's survival." He turned to leave, but not before locking eyes with Cross. There was something there, a warning, or maybe fear. When the door shut, Cross exhaled slowly. "They're closing ranks," he muttered. "Shutting us out." Torres's gaze hardened. "Then we don't give them the choice." That night, Cross signed himself out of the hospital against medical advice. Torres met him outside in a borrowed sedan, engine idling. "We're on our own now," she said. Cross slid into the passenger seat, wincing. "Where to?" "Warehouse District. Intel says Kane's fixer operates out of there. If the files from box 237 still exist, that's where we'll find them." Rain streaked the windshield as the city lights gave way to darkened industrial blocks. Cross checked his Glock. His ribs screamed, but his mind was sharp. "You realize if you're lying, Torres, I'll put a bullet in you myself." She glanced at him, unflinching. "Then I'd better not be lying." The warehouse loomed ahead, rusted siding, broken windows, graffiti scrawled across steel doors. They parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot. Inside, the air smelled of oil and mildew. Shadows stretched long across concrete floors. Voices echoed faintly. Cross motioned Torres to flank left. He crept along the wall, peering round stacked crates. There, the man in the grey suit, older than the grainy footage suggested. Sharp features, hair slicked back, a briefcase at his feet. He spoke quietly with 2 armed men, pointing to a laptop screen. Cross's pulse hammered. This was it. He stepped out, gun raised. "Police, hands where I can see them." The room froze. The grey-suited man turned slowly, a thin smile spreading across his face. "You're late, Detective Cross." Cross's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. It was the same distorted tone from the phone calls, only now, clear and unfiltered. The grey suit had been the one warning him all along. Before Cross could react, floodlights snapped on overhead. Dozens of armed men emerged from the shadows, rifles trained on him. Torres shouted from across the room, gun raised, but it was useless. They were surrounded. The grey suit picked up his briefcase, calm as stone. "You should have walked away." He nodded, and the warehouse doors slammed shut. Chapter 7. Dead Men Don't Testify. The warehouse air was thick with dust and tension. Floodlights bore down, casting harsh white circles that left everything else swallowed in shadows. Detective Ethan Cross stood with his Glock raised, his ribs screaming with every breath. Torres flanked him, weapons steady, though her eyes darted, calculating. Dozens of rifles trained on them. The man in the grey suit, Kane's fixer, watched with infuriating calm, his briefcase tucked under one arm. "You don't want to do this," Cross growled. The fixer's thin smile widened. "On the contrary, Detective, this is exactly what I want. To clean up messes." He snapped his fingers. The armed men advanced, boots echoing on the concrete. Cross tensed, ready for a last stand. But then, chaos. A distant explosion rattled the walls, followed by the wail of alarms. The floodlights flickered. Shouts erupted. Half the gunmen sprinted toward the far exit. Cross seized the distraction. "Move." He shoved Torres behind a stack of crates, bullets sparking off steel. They fired back blindly, carving a path to a side door. Adrenaline surged, overriding pain. They burst into the night rain, sprinting across cracked asphalt. Behind them, the warehouse roared with confusion, voices shouting orders in the dark. Cross and Torres ducked into an alley, breath ragged, hearts hammering. "Who the hell set off that blast?" Torres panted. Cross shook his head. "Doesn't matter. It bought us time. We need to regroup." Hours later, they holed up in a dingy motel room on the outskirts of town. Cross paced, too wired to sit. Torres sat on the bed, laptop open, piecing through digital breadcrumbs. "We need leverage," Cross muttered. "Something to prove Kane's connection before they bury us." Torres nodded. "I pulled morgue records from the robbery victims. 5 hostages, 3 robbers, all dead." Cross frowned. "All 3 robbers." Torres scrolled. "That's what the paperwork says. But look at this." She turned the laptop toward him. On screen was the death certificate for one Michael Rourke, one of the masked gunmen. Cause of death: gunshot trauma. Time of death: the night of the robbery. But the attached file photo showed a body on a slab, tagged toe, sheet pulled up, with a face barely visible. Cross leaned closer. His instincts prickled. "That's not Rourke." Torres frowned. "How can you tell?" "I worked a case on him 5 years ago in Chicago. Scar across his jaw, busted nose from a bar fight. This guy's face is clean." Torres' eyes widened. "So the body was swapped." Cross nodded grimly. "Which means Rourke's alive. And if he is, he knows who orchestrated the robbery." Torres whispered, "Dead men don't testify." "But if he's alive," Cross finished, "he's the key witness we need." Tracking Rourke wasn't easy. He'd vanished off the grid. No bank accounts, no phone records, no known address. But ghosts always left traces. Torres found one. A warehouse lease in his cousin's name, 2 towns over, registered 3 weeks before the robbery. Cross grabbed his coat. "Then that's where we start." The warehouse sat on the edge of an abandoned rail yard, its corrugated siding rusting in long streaks. Cross and Torres approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside, the air was damp, filled with the smell of oil and mold. They found him in the back office. Michael Rourke, alive. His hair was longer, streaked with grey, his face drawn and hollow, but the scar across his jaw was unmistakable. He sat at a table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him, a pistol resting by his hand. His eyes lifted slowly when they entered. Well, he rasped. Took you long enough. Cross leveled his gun. Drop it, Rourke. Rourke chuckled bitterly. If I wanted you dead, detective, you wouldn't have made it through the door. He pushed the pistol across the table, hands raised. Torres stepped forward cautiously. You were supposed to be dead. Yeah, Rourke said. Supposed to be. They pulled a switch at the morgue. Gave IA a body no-bodied. Question too hard. Cross's jaw tightened. Who's they? Rourke's laugh was hollow. You already know. Kane's people. The robbery wasn't about cash. It was about that damn box. We were hired to stage the chaos while the real prize walked out the door. Cross felt the anger surge hot in his veins. So you admit it. You killed 5 hostages for a cover-up. Rourke's eyes darkened. You think we wanted that? The order was clear. Create panic. Keep control. But someone panicked first. 1 gunshot turned into 5, and then it was all blood. Torres pressed. The man in the grey suit. Kane's fixer. He was there, wasn't he? Rourke's hands shook as he poured another drink. He's the devil himself. Cold calm. Said he was retrieving something for Kane. Files, photos, names. Told us once he had the box, we were expendable. Cross leaned closer. So why are you still alive? Rourke smirked faintly. Because I know where the backup is. Cross froze. Backup. Rourke nodded. Kane's too paranoid to keep everything in one place. Box 237 was just the main stash. But I know where he hid the copies. Documents, drives, enough to bury him if they see daylight. Torres's eyes lit. Where Rourke opened his mouth, a gunshot cracked through the window. Rourke jerked violently, blood blooming across his chest. Torres screamed, diving for cover. Cross spun, firing toward the shattered glass, but saw only darkness outside. Rourke collapsed, coughing blood. He grabbed Cross's shirt with trembling fingers, pulling him close. Safe. House, he gasped. River Road locker. His eyes rolled back, grip loosening. He was gone. Cross knelt there, fury boiling. Another witness silenced, but not before giving them one last spread. Torres crawled over, shaken. We need to move now. If they knew where he was, they know we were here. Cross nodded, jaw set like stone. Then let's finish this. They raced through the rain-slick streets, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Torres drove knuckles white on the wheel. Cross sat beside her, staring out into the storm. Every lead had been cut down, every witness silenced, but Rourke's final words gave them one last chance. River Road, the safe house, the locker. If Kane's backup evidence was there, it could blow the entire conspiracy wide open. Cross felt the weight of it pressing on him. They were running out of time. Chapter 8, The Warehouse Confession. Rain blurred the world into streaks of grey, as Detective Ethan Cross and Torres tore down River Road. The SUV in their rear view grew larger by the second, headlights burning like predator eyes. Cross chambered around, the sound loud over the storm. They know about the locker. They're not letting us get there alive. Torres's jaw clenched. Then we make them regret it. She jerked the wheel, cutting hard onto a side street. Tires screamed, water spraying in a fan. The SUV followed, relentless. Cross leaned out the passenger window, firing twice. Sparks flew as bullets kissed the SUV's grille, but it kept coming. Torres swerved again, barreling into the shadow of an old warehouse district. She killed the headlights, skidding the sedan behind a row of rusted shipping containers. The SUV roared past, hunting blind. They sat in silence, breaths heavy, rain hammering the roof. Cross finally spoke. We've bought a few minutes, not more. Torres nodded. Then we use them. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with mildew and silence. Their flashlights cut narrow beams through the dark, landing on forgotten crates and cobwebbed machinery. At the far end stood a row of steel lockers, numbers faded but still legible. Cross's heart thudded. River Road locker, number 14. He knelt, hands trembling as he forced the lock open with a pry bar. The metal screeched, echoing like a scream. Inside sat a small fireproof case. Cross lifted it out, heavy with promise, the kind of weight that could topple men in power. Torres leaned in. This is it, the backup. Before Cross could answer, a voice echoed from the shadows. Step away from the case, detective. They spun, flashlights cutting across the gloom. The grey suit stood there, calm as ever, flanked by 2 armed men. His umbrella dripped rainwater onto the floor, like he'd strolled in from a leisurely walk. Cross raised his Glock. Not this time. The fixer's smile was thin, cold. Do you really think you're walking out of here with that case? Torres's voice was steel. We've got enough to bury Kane. The fixer chuckled. You still don't get it. Evidence doesn't matter when the system is owned. Kane isn't afraid of courts. He's afraid of chaos. That's what I'm here to prevent. Cross's finger tightened on the trigger. You killed Cole. You killed Tommy. How many bodies are you stacking just to protect one man? The fixer tilted his head. As many as it takes. Better a handful of corpses than the collapse of an empire. Kane keeps order. Remove him, and the vultures tear this country apart. Cross spat on the floor. Spare me the Patriot Act. You're just a cleaner. The fixer's eyes glittered. Maybe, but I clean messes like you. He nodded to his men, rifles raised. Torres whispered, we're not making it out. Cross glanced at her, jaw set. Then we make damn sure they don't either. They opened fire. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the warehouse, ricocheting off steel and shattering glass. Cross dove behind a crate, clutching the case to his chest. Torres rolled low, firing in bursts. One gunman dropped with a cry, blood pooling under him. The fixer didn't flinch. He stepped back into the shadows, calm as if the firefight were a mild inconvenience. Kill them both, his voice echoed. Cross's ribs burned, his lungs on fire. He returned fire, dropping the second gunman with a shot to the chest. Silence fell. Only the fixer remained, his figure half-lit in the dark. You've made a mistake, detective, he said. Now you know too much. He raised his own pistol, sleek and polished. Cross steadied his Glock. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. For a heartbeat, time froze. 2 men staring down barrels, rain dripping through broken panes above, thunder rolling like a drumbeat. Then, another shot rang out. Not from Cross. The fixer jerked, eyes wide in shock, as a crimson bloom spread across his chest. He staggered, dropping his pistol, collapsing against the locker row. Torres lowered her smoking gun, chest heaving. He was about to kill you, she said. Cross stared at the fixer's body. The man who'd haunted there every step, the phantom voice on the phone, the shadow in the footage, finally silenced. But as he looked closer, his blood ran cold. The fixer wasn't smiling anymore, but in his dying grip, clutched tight even as the blood spread, was a small black USB drive. Cross pried it free, heart pounding. On the side was a single word, scratched in silver marker. Kane. Back in the motel, Cross and Torres set the drive on the table between them. This is it, Torres whispered. This has to be the files, the proof. Cross slid his laptop over, plugging the drive in. The screen lit up, a folder opening. Inside, hundreds of documents, bank transfers, offshore ledgers, photographs of Kane with men whose faces screamed organized crime, enough to topple a career, maybe an entire government branch. Torres's hand shook as she scrolled. This is bigger than we thought. Not just Kane, judges, cops, CEOs. He's got half the state in his pocket. Cross's gut twisted. Which means if we release this, we're not just taking down Kane, we're putting targets on our backs from every name in this folder. Torres looked at him, eyes burning. So what do we do? Before Cross could answer, the laptop flickered, then went black. What the hell? Torres muttered. A new window appeared, lines of code scrolling. Then, a message. This drive is encrypted. Unauthorized access triggers deletion in 60 seconds. The countdown began. 60, 59, 58. Torres's face drained of color. It's a kill switch. Cross's pulse thundered. He booby-trapped it. We need the key. Torres whispered. But he's dead. They both looked at each other. Dead men don't testify. But maybe the fixer had left someone who could. Chapter 9. Truth Buried in Ashes. The motel room was silent, except for the furious ticking of the laptop countdown. 10, 9, 8. Detective Ethan Cross's pulse pounded in his ears. Torres hammered at the keyboard, sweat beading on her brow. Come on, she muttered. 7, 6. Torres, Cross barked. Can you stop it? I don't know, she snapped back. The encryption's military grade. Whoever built this wanted it dead the second it was touched wrong. 5-4. Cross's mind raced. The fixer's final smirk, the USB clenched in his dying hand. He hadn't intended them to just find the drive. He'd left it as bait. 3-2. Torres slammed the power button. The screen went black. Silence. Cross exhaled slowly. Did it wipe? Torres checked the drive. Still here, for now. But unless we get the decryption key, it's useless. Cross sat back, fury simmering. They had the truth in their hands, but locked inside a coffin of code. The next day, smoke still clung to Pinebrook. Overnight, a fire had torn through the city archives, the very office where Kane's financial records would have been stored. Cross and Torres stood across the street, watching firefighters hose down smoldering rubble. Convenient timing, Torres muttered. Cross ground his teeth. They're burning everything. Every paper trail, every witness. As if on cue, his phone buzzed. An anonymous message. You can't stop what's already ash. Cross shoved the phone into his pocket. They're taunting us now. Torres eyed him. Or warning you. Cross's jaw set. Doesn't matter. We've still got the drive. That's one thing they couldn't burn. Except it's a brick without the password. Torres reminded him. Cross glanced at the charred building, an idea sparking. Not if we find Kane's backup man. Someone had to build that encryption. Tech like that doesn't come cheap. And nobody like Kane gets his hands dirty. Torres's eyes narrowed. You're thinking subcontractor. Cross nodded. We find the coder. We find the key. Hours later, they traced a lead to a name buried in the bank's IT contracts. Elias Grant, a cybersecurity consultant with a history of shady government gigs. Grant lived in a fortified townhouse on the edge of the city. Cross and Torres parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot under the cover of dusk. Inside, they found him hunched over a wall of monitors, tapping away with jittery precision. Grant spun at the sound of the door crashing open, eyes wide behind thick glasses. Who the hell? Cross shoved him against the wall. You built the kill switch. Grant stammered. I don't know what you're talking about. Torres tossed the USB drive onto his desk. This ring a bell. Grant froze. His Adam's apple bobbed. Cross pressed harder. Decrypt it now. Grant's eyes darted between them. You don't understand. If I touch it without the key, it's gone forever. And if I give you the key, his voice cracked. I'm dead. Cross's voice dropped to a growl. Newsflash, Grant. You're already dead if you don't. For a moment, silence. Then Grant slumped, defeated. He tapped a few keys, pulling up a password prompt. His fingers hovered, trembling. Do you know what's on here? He whispered. Torres leaned in. Evidence that can bring down Kane. Grant shook his head. Not just Kane. Everyone. Judges, governors, people so high up you don't even see their shadows. This drive isn't a weapon. It's a bomb. You set it off, and there's no going back. Cross's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time someone pulled the pin. Grant typed a string of characters. The screen lit. The countdown gone. The files unlocked. Cross and Torres scanned the screen. Wire transfers. Offshore accounts. Photos of Kane shaking hands with known cartel bosses. Recordings of private meetings. It was everything. Torres whispered. This could tear the whole system down. Cross nodded grimly. Which is why they'll kill anyone who's seen it. As if on cue, headlights swept across the windows. A car screeched to a halt outside. Boots hit pavement. Grant's face went pale. They're here. Cross raised his Glock. How many exits? Back door, Grant stammered, leads to the alley. Gunfire shattered the front windows. Shouts filled the night. Torres yanked the drive from the computer. We've got what we came for. Let's move. Cross covered them as bullets ripped through the townhouse. They barreled through the back, slamming into the rain-slick alley. But the alley wasn't empty. A black SUV blocked the path, its doors already swinging open. Cross fired first, taking down the lead gunman. Torres returned fire, forcing the others into cover. Grant scrambled behind them, shrieking. More figures closed in from both ends of the alley. Cross realized the truth too late. They weren't here to scare them. They were here to erase them. By some miracle, they made it out alive. Barely. The sedan they stole reeked of gasoline and blood. Cross drove, knuckles white on the wheel, while Torres clutched the USB like it was a live grenade. In the back seat, Grant whimpered. You don't understand. You can't win. They'll bury you before sunrise. Cross's eyes burned in the rear view. Then we'd better move faster. They reached another safe house. an old hunting cabin on the edge of the woods. The storm had finally broken, leaving only the hush of dripping trees. Inside, Torres spread the files across the laptop screen again. "This is it, Ethan. This is the smoking gun. We could take this to every news outlet in the country. They couldn't kill the story fast enough." Cross sat at the table, staring at the evidence. His gut twisted. "You ever wonder," he said slowly, "what happens if we do? If Kane falls, all his enemies crawl out of the woodwork. The vacuum gets filled by something worse. Maybe chaos. Maybe blood in the streets." Torres shook her head. "You can't think like that. Justice doesn't wait for convenience. People died for this. We owe it to them to bring it into the light." Cross looked at her. Her conviction was fierce, unshakable. But doubt gnawed at him. From the corner, Grant's voice trembled. "You don't get it. This drive isn't a cure. It's a contagion. You release it, the whole system collapses, and you'll be the first ones crucified for it." Cross closed his eyes. He'd carried badges, buried partners, stared into the hollow eyes of victims. He knew corruption, knew rot, but he also knew what happened when order crumbled. Torres slammed her fist on the table. "No more hesitation. We end this tonight." Chapter 10. The Heist That Never Happened. The cabin was a war zone. Bullets tore through the walls, splintering wood, shattering glass. Detective Ethan Cross dove behind the table, dragging Torres with him. The laptop toppled to the floor, the USB drive skittering across the planks. Outside, boots crunched on gravel. Voices barked orders in clipped, military tones. "They've got us pinned," Torres hissed, shoving a fresh magazine into her pistol. Cross grabbed the drive, shoving it into his pocket. "Then we don't let them take us alive," Grant whimpered from the corner, curled into a ball. "They'll kill us all. You don't know these people." A bullet punched through the wall inches above his head. He screamed, covering his face. Cross glanced at Torres. "Back door," she nodded. "Leads into the woods, but they'll have it covered. Then we make a hole." He flipped the table onto its side. Together, they shoved it against the shattered window. Gunfire riddled the wood as they crouched behind it. Then Cross hurled a chair through the far window. The assassins outside turned, unleashing fire at the decoy. "Move!" Cross roared. They bolted through the back door into the trees, rain-slicked mud sucking at their boots. Muzzle flashes lit the forest behind them as bullets snapped through branches. Cross fired blindly over his shoulder, dragging Grant by the collar when the man stumbled. Torres covered their flank, steady and relentless. They crashed through the woods until a riverbank loomed ahead, swollen with rain. The current churned black and violent. Grant fell to his knees, gasping. "We can't cross." Cross yanked him up. "We don't have a choice." Gunfire cracked. Bullet tore past Torres' arm. She cried out, but kept moving. Cross shoved Grant into the river, then leaped in after him. The icy water swallowed them whole, dragging them downstream. Torres splashed in last, teeth gritted against the current. Behind them, the assassins fired into the water, but the storm and darkness hid their targets. The river carried them away. They surfaced a mile downstream, coughing, soaked, and bruised. They dragged themselves onto the muddy bank, lungs heaving. Grant collapsed, sobbing. "This is insane. You can't fight them. Kane owns everything. Even if you expose him, they'll spin it. You'll be hunted." Cross pulled the drive from his pocket, holding it up in the moonlight. "Then let them hunt. I'm not burying 5 hostages and 2 witnesses just so a politician can sleep easy." Torres gripped his shoulder. "We take it public. Tonight. Call every journalist, every outlet. Drop it like a bomb." Cross met her eyes. She was fierce, resolute, the same fire that had kept them alive this long, but his gut twisted. He remembered what the fixer had said. Better a handful of corpses than the collapse of an empire. How many bodies would pile up if they pulled the pin? By dawn, they reached the city. They holed up in a safe garage, dripping wet, the laptop perched on the hood of a rusted sedan. Torres worked fast, uploading fragments of the decrypted files to a secure cloud. Grant hovered, wringing his hands. "Once you hit send, there's no undo. They'll come for you, your families, anyone who ever shook your hand." Torres didn't look up. "That's the price of justice." Crow stared at the progress bar, inching forward. Each percent felt heavier than the last. Finally, Torres glanced at him. "Ethan, once this goes live, there's no going back. You in?" Cross hesitated. His badge had always been a shield, a line between chaos and order. But this wasn't just about a crooked senator anymore. This was about the entire system. He thought of Karen Mitchell, the last survivor, sitting alone under protection, waiting for someone to save her. He thought of Dennis and Tommy, silenced for knowing too much. He thought of the 5 dead on the bank floor. His jaw set. Do it. Torres hit enter. The files streamed into the cloud. For a moment, it felt like victory. Then the laptop screen went black. Cross froze. What happened? Torres's fingers flew across the keys. No, 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 no. On screen, a new message appeared. Unauthorized upload detected. Files destroyed. The drive ejected itself with a mechanical click. Dead Torres stared in horror. It was a dead man's switch. The fixer built a failsafe. Any attempt to release it outside his network, and it wipes. Cross's stomach dropped. So it's gone. Grant laughed. A high, broken sound. I told you, you can't win. The house always cleans up. Cross slammed him against the car, gun to his head. Where's the other copy? Grant sobbed. There isn't one. That was it. Torres pulled Cross back, shaking her head. He's telling the truth. Cross lowered his gun slowly. Rage and despair churned inside him. They'd risked everything, and ended with ash. Hours later, they sat in Cross's office, silent. The precinct buzzed around them like nothing had happened. On the news, Senator Robert Kane stood at a podium, smiling, shaking hands, talking about community safety initiatives, and the importance of law and order. Cross stared at the screen, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. Torres shut it off. We lost this round, but we're still alive. That has to count for something. Cross shook his head. Tell that to the dead. That night, as Cross slumped at his desk, a courier dropped a small padded envelope. No return address. Cross tore it open cautiously. Inside was a single USB drive. A note, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting as before. Read, for when you're ready to finish this. Cross stared at it, heart pounding. The game wasn't over. Not yet.